All right, now let's talk about the distinction here between laboratory experiments and field experiments. In laboratory experiments, the control group and the test group are studied in an environment created wholly by the investigator. So there's an artificiality to laboratory experiments. If they're the laboratory experiments, which are almost always on human subjects, those who are being studied are aware that they're being studied. Field experiment, the control and test groups are studied in their normal surroundings, living their lives as they naturally do, probably unaware that experiment is even taking place. So field experiments have certain advantages over lab experiments, but there are also disadvantages that field experiments have relative to lab experiments. Here, you've probably seen this protocol before. There's a random assignment of individuals to the test group and control group. There's pre-measurement of the dependent variable. So you pre-measure the test group and the control group on the dependent. Why do this? Because during the course of the experiment, perhaps the control group changes as well on the dependent variable, simply because of the awareness that they're being studied. So this gives you a gauge, a comparative gauge for how much change occurs because of the independent variable. The test group receives the treatment, the control group does not. Then you post-measure the dependent. Any difference between the groups on the dependent, net of any other changes that occurred in the control group, can be attributed to the intervention, that is the independent variable. Now here's a famous classic laboratory experiment in political science by Shanto Iyengar and Don Kinder, and it's on agenda setting. Now let's assume, like Iyengar and Kinder, that you want to study the effect of media on the problems that individuals think are important. Assume you want to investigate the role of mass media in setting the political agenda and affecting the kinds of issues people care about most. Suppose the media are covering a political scandal and giving less play to the state of the economy. You reason that this unbalanced emphasis will affect citizens' priorities in much the same way as is reflected in the media. Here's your hypothesis. Let's say, in a comparison of individuals, those who are exposed to issues covered by the media will be more likely to perceive those issues as important than those who are not exposed. It would seem like a straightforward comparison here. Ask a large number of people how closely they follow media coverage. Based on this information, divide them into two groups: those who follow the media, the test group, and those who follow the media pay less attention to the media coverage, the control group. Then you present a list of political issues to both groups and ask participants to rank the issues in descending order of importance. When you compare the two lists, you want to attribute the differences between the two lists to the variable media exposure. But you really can't do that, because it may be that the attention payers are systematically, in terms of selection bias, different from the non-attention payers. So the resolution of that is random assignment. Individuals were randomly assigned in the Iyengar and Kinder experiment to a test group and control group. Both groups were asked to rank in descending order of importance a list of problems facing society. Problems such as defense preparedness, inflation, illegal drugs, the environment, and so on. And of course, what Iyengar and Kinder found was that both groups, since they were random clones of each other, both groups had identical lists of priorities. Now, the treatment phase. The test group was shown doctored newscasts that emphasized the importance of certain problems. The control group was shown normal newscasts. Then, both groups were post-measured in terms of what priorities they thought were important for society to deal with. Both groups were asked to rank, yet again, in descending order of importance a list of problems facing society. Well, for the control group, the list of priorities didn't change. But for the test group, the changes were stunning. Compared with the control subjects, whose rankings did not change appreciably from beginning to end, individuals who had been shown the doctored newscast dramatically altered their list of priorities. For example, in one instance in which the investigators had interspliced stories about defense preparedness, test subjects promoted defense from 6th place to 2nd place, whereas control subjects reported no change in their assessment of this important national problem. Laboratory experiments have high internal validity. That is, in terms of the conditions that are artificially created by the experimenter, you can attribute causation to the independent variable. In this case, that the reordering of stories that the media presented, you can attribute that to the change in how respondents, or I'm sorry, how subjects ranked stories. Within the conditions created artificially by the researcher, the effect of the independent variable and the dependent variable is isolated from other plausible explanations. Lab experiments have high internal validity. The problem with laboratory experiments is that they often are weak in terms of external validity. External validity refers to how generalizable the results are of a study. The results of a study can be generalized. That is, its findings can be applied to situations in the non-artificial natural world. Studies that have high external validity have a more natural, generalizable results. Lab experiments, by their very nature, are comparatively weak on external validity, although Iyengar and Kinder went on to make a pretty strong case that for their results, they did seem to fit what was going on in the natural world. Lab experiments tend to have lower external validity than do field experiments. So along come field experiments that really remedy this whole problem of external validity, because they do take place in the natural social settings that people live in. So let's talk about field experiments here. Field experiments are conducted in the real world. Like all experiments, of course, this is the signature condition of experiments. Use random assignments. Field experiments may pre-measure the dependent variable. Pre-measurement is less common in field experiments than laboratory experiments. Field experiments have high external validity. That is, their results are more plausibly generalized to the real world, since they take place in the real world. Internal validity can be a problem for field experiments. That is to say, with the random assignment that takes place, it's important that all those in the test and control group be measured, and that's not always the case when you're dealing with people in the natural world. Here's a famous example. Gerber and Green pioneered the study of get out the vote drives, GOTV drives, on turnout. And they did so with a series of field experiments that a lot of their students have gone on to extend and expand on Gerber and Green. This is one of their earliest field experiments that Gerber and Green reported, American Political Science Review. Random assignment, of course, was used. Prior to an election, 29,000 individuals in a metro area were randomly assigned to 3 treatment groups and 1 control group. So this is a little bit more nuanced than the lab experiment that we talked about earlier. The 3 treatment groups receive get out the vote contact in 3 different modalities. Personal canvassing, that is to say, canvassers went directly to the homes of these prospective voters and canvassed them, reminding them to turn out on election day. Direct mail, another group received mailings encouraging them to vote on election day. And then a third group received telephone calls. So we can assess the relative impact of these 3 kinds of GOTV contact, and we can compare those to a control. The control group did not receive any GOTV contact. After the election, the researchers went to election authorities and found out which respondents voted and which did not vote, which subjects voted and which did not. Following the election, investigators obtained post-measures by consulting voting records to see who had voted and who had stayed home. And the results are really very interesting. I guess it's not surprising that personal canvassing GOTV had the largest effect, followed by mail. Phone call group was no more likely to turn out than were individuals in the control group. These findings, I'll just read from the text here briefly, these findings might give pause to professional campaigners, especially those who specialize in phone bank mobilization. Not surprising, personal canvassing produced the biggest boost. People contacted face-to-face, and this is stunning, had a turnout rate almost 9 percentage points higher than the control group. That's just a real potent effect of face-to-face canvassing. Male recipients were somewhat more likely to vote than the control group, although the effect here was modest. Individuals in the phone call group were no more likely to turn out than were individuals in the control group. Interestingly, whereas the method of contact mattered, the content of the contact message in this research did not. So this is a great example of a field experiment. Of course, field experiments and lab experiments do have limitations. Field experiments sometimes have internal validity problems because not all individuals in the test group can be measured. You know, it's a real practical difficulty. And in order for an experiment to be completely internally valid, those in the test and control group have to be measured. And of course, here's the biggest stumbling block for experiments of all kinds. There are many characteristics of interest to political researchers like sex, race, simply cannot be experimentally manipulated.